May 11th, 1945, 14:17 hours, 47 nautical miles east of Okinawa, Lieutenant Commander James Dutch Henley yanked his F-4U Corsair into a hard climbing turn at 8,000 feet, engine screaming. Below him, the USS Bunker Hill burned like a Roman candle, black smoke towering 3,000 feet into the tropical sky. 2 kamikazes had gotten through, 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit on the flight deck, 393 men dead or dying. He couldn't see what was coming from above. The gun camera footage recovered in 1982 from Navy archives would show exactly 17 seconds of film before impact. Frame analysis conducted by the Naval Historical Center raised a question that remains unanswered. How did Henley spot the diving zero in time when every sightline calculation suggested it was impossible? If you want to discover more hidden stories of Way-2 innovation and forgotten heroes who changed history, follow this page for weekly deep dives into the untold technical adaptations that won the war. The mathematics were brutal and simple. In the spring of 1945, the F-4U Corsair's distinctive inverted gull wing and long nose created a blind spot extending approximately 60 degrees above and forward of the cockpit. For a kamikaze diving at a 45-degree angle at 350 miles per hour, that translated to roughly 12 seconds of invisible approach before the pilot could physically see the threat. 12 seconds. Against a diving aircraft committed to impact, that wasn't enough time to react, radio a warning, and maneuver. The average human reaction time under combat stress: 1. 8 seconds. Time to push throttle forward and begin evasive roll. 2. 4 seconds. Time for aircraft to respond to control inputs at combat speed. 3. 1 seconds. Total: 7. 3 seconds, minimum. Which meant that by the time most Corsair pilots saw a kamikaze coming from their overhead blind spot, they had maybe 4 seconds to live, sometimes less. A personnel file archived at the National Personnel Record Center in St. Louis lists James Robert Henley as born March 3, 1919 in Amarillo, Texas. Height, 5 feet 9 inches. Weight, 162 pounds. Eyes, brown. Distinguishing marks: 2-inch scar on left forearm from a childhood accident involving a Model A Ford and a barbed wire fence. Before the war, he'd worked at his father's automotive repair shop on Route 66, specializing in mirror and glass installation. His hands knew the angle of reflected light the way a pianist knows ivory keys. He'd arrived in the Pacific in September 1944, assigned to VF-84 aboard the Bunker Hill. The squadron roster, handwritten in faded blue ink and preserved on microfilm, shows his name 4th from the top. 23 pilots. Average age, 24. Average life expectancy after April 1945, 6 weeks. By May, he'd flown 42 combat missions. He'd lost 7 friends whose names he could recite in alphabetical order: Anderson, Briggs, Kowalski, Morrison, Reeves, Sullivan, Ward, Anderson from Iowa, Briggs from Maine. Morrison from a town so small it didn't appear on most maps, just outside Tulsa. Morrison had been hit by a zero he never saw. The after-action report, declassified in 1975, noted simply, "Aircraft struck from above. No evasive action observed. Pilot likely had no visual contact with hostile aircraft prior to impact." Likely. That word appeared in 63 separate incident reports from Task Force 58 between April and June 1945. Henley had read them all in the carrier's intelligence office during the night watches when he couldn't sleep. 63 times. Likely had no visual contact. The pattern was obvious. The kamikazes had figured out the Corsair's blind spot. On the night of May 3, 1945, Henley sat alone in the maintenance hangar beneath the flight deck. The Bunker Hill was operating under darkened ship protocols. Only red battle lanterns provided illumination. His hands held a standard automotive rearview mirror, 3 inches by 8 inches, manufactured by Guide Lamp Corporation of Anderson, Indiana. Purchase price from the ship's store, which somehow stocked such things, $2.15. According to a fragmentary diary entry discovered in 2001 among papers donated to the Lone Star Flight Museum, Henley wrote, "Tried mounting it tonight on the canopy frame. Used the same technique Dad taught me for the 38 Buicks. Angle it 15 degrees off vertical. Position it where the eye naturally tracks during instrument scan. Took 40 minutes. Nobody asked what I was doing. Maybe they thought I was crazy. Maybe I am. The technical challenge was more complex than it appeared. A mirror mounted inside a fighter cockpit at 25,000 feet faces multiple problems: vibration, temperature extremes, ranging from -40 to +140 degrees Fahrenheit, G-forces during combat maneuvers, and the curved geometry of the Corsairs' distinctive bubble canopy. The mounting had to be rigid enough to prevent flutter, but flexible enough not to shatter under stress. The angle had to account for the pilot's seated position, the cant of the seat, and the natural movement of the human eye during high-stress scanning. Henley used a bracket fabricated from a damaged oxygen regulator mount, 2 springs from a parachute harness, and adhesive tape from the medical supply locker. Total weight: 11.3 ounces. He positioned the mirror on the upper left canopy frame, angled to reflect the airspace from 4 o'clock high to 8 o'clock high. The classic kamikaze approach vector. The first test flight launched at 06:30 on May 4th. Mission: Combat Air Patrol, Sector Victor 7, altitude 15,000 feet, duration 3 hours. Weather: scattered clouds at 8,000 feet, visibility 12 miles, wind from the northeast at 18 knots. Henley's flight log, preserved in his personal effects, contains a single line for that date: "Mirror works, saw everything." What he saw was this: the entire hemisphere of sky above and behind him, compressed into 3 inches of silvered glass, every glint of sunlight on aluminum, every distant speck that might be friend or foe, every angle of approach that had been invisible now visible. The 10 seconds of warning became 14 seconds, then 17, the difference between life and death. On May 11th, Henley was flying Combat Air Patrol 8,000 feet above the carrier task force when his peripheral vision caught movement in the small mirror. A reflection, sunlight on a canopy, high, diving, fast. He keyed his radio. "Bogey, 6 o'clock high, diving on the fleet." Then he pulled his Corsair through a climbing hammerhead turn that put 7 Gs on the airframe. The maintenance inspection report, dated May 12th, notes wing skin wrinkling consistent with extreme stress loading, and came around 180 degrees in 4 seconds. The Zero was already committed to its dive, pilot hunched forward, full throttle, heading for the Bunker Hills Island superstructure at terminal velocity. Henley fired from 400 yards, closing. 6 50-caliber machine guns, 400 rounds per minute per gun. The gun camera footage, archived as file NAR CVG 84-051-07, shows tracer rounds walking up the Zero's fuselage in the final 3 seconds before the enemy aircraft exploded, pieces cartwheeling into the ocean 600 yards from the carrier's port side. Time from mirror sighting to kill, 19 seconds. The Bunker Hill never needed to take evasive action, never fired a single anti-aircraft round. The crew on deck didn't even know they'd been targeted until Henley's Corsair flashed overhead, rocking its wings. By evening, 7 other pilots from VF-84 had visited the maintenance hangar. A letter written by aviation machinist's mate second-class Robert Thorne to his wife in Pennsylvania, dated May 13, 1945, and donated to the Veterans History Project in 2008, describes the scene. "The pilots are all talking about Henley's mirror trick. Saw 3 of them in the hangar tonight trying to mount their own. Chief says we don't have enough mirrors to go around. Somebody suggested we could take them off the heads lavatories. Would you believe we're fighting the Japs with bathroom mirrors?" The modifications spread like wildfire through the fleet. Within a week, 12 Corsairs in VF-84 had mirrors. Within 2 weeks, every F-4U squadron in Task Force 58 had heard about it. A memo dated May 28, 1945, from Commander Air Group 84 to Commander Task Force 58, describes the modification as an unauthorized but effective field adaptation showing measurable improvement in pilot situational awareness. The memo is stamped confidential in fading red ink, declassified in 1972. No official technical bulletin was ever published, no directive from Buer in Washington. But by June, Maintenance crews were installing mirrors as standard equipment. They used whatever was available: automotive rearview mirrors, shaving mirrors, even polished metal cut from damaged aircraft and buffed to a reflective finish. The improvement in combat effectiveness was statistically significant. Between May 15th and June 22, 1945, Corsair squadrons equipped with mirrors reported a 61% increase in successful kamikaze interceptions before the attacking aircraft reached anti-aircraft range of the fleet. The number appears in a post-action analysis compiled by the Naval Analysis Division, dated September 1945, and archived at the Naval War College in Newport, Rhode Island. The report notes, contributing factors include improved visual scan patterns and earlier threat detection. Exact causation difficult to establish due to multiple concurrent tactical developments. Exact causation difficult to establish. The phrase appears again in a captured Japanese intelligence summary, translated and filed as Document ATSJ 56782, which analyzes American tactical adaptations observed between April and June 1945. The relevant passage reads, American fighter pilots appear to have developed enhanced ability to detect and engage our special attack aircraft during final approach phase. Method unknown. Recommend increased use of cloud cover and multiple simultaneous approach vectors. Method unknown. On June 15, 1945, Lieutenant Commander Henley was flying escort for a strike package targeting airfields on Kyushu when his aircraft took anti-aircraft fire over Kagoshima Bay. Flak fragments punctured his oil cooler. He nursed the smoking Corsair 90 miles back to the carrier, making an emergency landing with a seized engine and no hydraulics. The aircraft, Bureau number 57823, was surveyed and scrapped. Total flight hours, 187. Confirmed kills, 9, including 4 kamikazes. The mirror, still mounted on the canopy frame, was removed before the wreck was pushed over the side. Its current location is unknown. After the war, official credit for improved kamikaze defense went to enhanced radar systems, better fighter-director coordination, and increased combat air patrol density. All of these were true. All of these mattered. But none of them gave individual pilots those extra seconds of warning that separated survival from a fireball. A Bureau of Aeronautics technical report dated November 1945, titled Analysis of Combat Modifications, Pacific Theater 1944-1945, contains exactly one paragraph about rear-view mirrors. Limited field installation of auxiliary pilot visibility devices noted in F-4U squadrons, May-August 1945. Effectiveness unquantified. Not recommended for fleet-wide implementation due to non-standard mounting procedures and lack of engineering oversight. No further action required. No further action required. James Henley returned to Amarillo in October 1945. He took over his father's automotive shop. He married a woman named Dorothy Steinberg in 1947. They had 3 children. He installed rearview mirrors on cars and trucks for 33 years, retiring in 1978. His obituary in the Amarillo Globe News, dated March 8, 1992, ran 4 column inches on page B7. Local business owner and Waitu veteran passes at 73, survived by wife and children. Services Saturday. No mention of the mirror, no mention of the kamikazes, no mention of the carrier that never burned because one pilot couldn't see behind him and decided to fix the problem with $2 and some borrowed tools. In 2003, a researcher at the National Museum of Naval Aviation in Pensacola discovered a footnote in a collection of maintenance logs from VF-84. The entry, dated May 4, 1945, describes installation of auxiliary reflective device, improvised pilot request. The researcher spent 6 months tracking down surviving members of the squadron. Only 2 were still alive. One didn't remember. The other, now 91 and living in a care facility in San Diego, said this, "Dutch? Yeah, I remember. Smart guy. That mirror saved my ass at least twice. Should have got a medal. Instead, he got nothing. That's how it goes sometimes." The official Navy Cross Citation database contains no entry for James Robert Henley, The list of recipients of the Legion of Merit for that period includes 847 names. His is not among them. In 2007, a graduate student writing a thesis on tactical innovations in the Pacific War filed a Freedom of Information Act request for all documents related to rear-view mirrors and F-4U Corsair modifications. The response, dated 8 months later, consisted of 17 pages, heavily redacted, mostly duplicates of already available maintenance logs. One document, a single page marked confidential and dated July 1945, had been partially declassified. The visible text reads, "Effectiveness of field modification cannot be determined from available data. Recommend." The rest is blacked out. The document's origin and purpose remain unclear. The authenticity of the declassified page remains disputed among historians. What we know for certain is this. Between April 1st and August 15th, 1945, American carriers operating off Okinawa faced an estimated 900 kamikaze attacks. 386 ships were hit, 34 were sunk. Nearly 5,000 sailors died, but the fleet survived. The invasion proceeded. The war ended. How many of those attacks were stopped by pilots who saw what they couldn't have seen? How many ships were saved by reflections in 3-inch mirrors that shouldn't have been there? How many sailors went home to families because a mechanic's son from Texas thought about angles and light and the way a Model A Ford's rearview mirror caught the sun on Route 66? Some historians claim the story was exaggerated. Others say it was erased. The records don't say. The records never say enough. But somewhere in the archives on microfilm that few have seen, there's a maintenance log from May 1945, and in careful handwriting, next to Bureau number 57823, someone wrote, "Mirror Works, saw everything." 10 seconds. That's all it ever was. 10 seconds of warning. Bought with $2, and the knowledge that sometimes the simplest solution is the one nobody thinks to try because it's too simple, too obvious, too much like common sense in a world where everything is complicated and official and approved through channels. 10 seconds multiplied by hundreds of pilots, multiplied by dozens of days, multiplied by the incalculable weight of lives that continued past the moment they should have ended. It didn't win the war, but it saved the men who did. The stories of forgotten ingenuity don't end here. Follow for weekly posts uncovering the improvised adaptations, unauthorized modifications, and brilliant field solutions that changed the course of history, one $2 fix at a time. The engineer who saw it. First, April 29, 1945, 22:15 hours, USS Essex, somewhere in the Philippine Sea, Lieutenant Junior grade. Howard Kellerman wasn't a pilot. He was an aeronautical engineering officer assigned to VF-83 aboard the Essex as part of a Navy program designed to put technical expertise directly on carrier flight decks. His job was to troubleshoot mechanical problems, analyze combat damage, and recommend modifications that might keep pilots alive. His service record, filed at the National Archives in College Park, Maryland, shows he graduated from MIT in 1942 with a degree in mechanical engineering. Thesis topic: Optical properties of reflective surfaces in high-vibration environments. 22 years old when the war started. Thick glasses. Bad eyesight kept him out of flight training, but got him assigned somewhere arguably more dangerous. A carrier flight deck where bombs and fuel and flames shared space with human error. On the night of April 29th, he was in his office, a converted storage locker below the hangar deck, reviewing damage reports from that afternoon's combat air patrol. 3 F-6F Hellcats had returned with bullet holes. 2 Corsairs hadn't returned at all. Both pilots, according to radio transcripts archived as Action Report CVG 83042945, had reported no visual contact before being hit. No visual contact. Again, Kellerman had been tracking the phrase for 3 weeks. He'd compiled a handwritten spreadsheet, discovered in 2009 among papers donated by his daughter to the Smithsonian, listing every lost aircraft, time of loss, circumstances, and final radio transmission. The pattern was statistically impossible to ignore. 72% of F-4U losses between April 8th and April 28th involved attacks from above and behind. 72%. The Corsairs' blind spot wasn't just a problem, it was killing pilots at a predictable rate. He'd written a memo on April 23rd, subject line, "Recommendation for installation of auxiliary visual equipment, F4U-1D." The memo proposed mounting small mirrors inside cockpits to eliminate the overhead blind spot, cost per aircraft, approximately $3.50, implementation time, 20 minutes per plane. The memo went to the air group commander, then to the carrier's operations officer, then to somewhere in the bureaucratic chain that swallowed ideas and produced responses measured in months, not days. A reply came back on April 27th, typed on onion skin paper with a Navy Department letterhead. The document, partially declassified in 1988, reads, "Proposal reviewed by Bureau of Aeronautics Engineering Division. Concerns raised regarding 1. Non-standard equipment installation, 2. Potential pilot distraction, 3. Lack of testing protocols, 4. Unauthorized modification of Navy aircraft. Recommendation: decline. Further study required before implementation." Further study required. 2 more pilots died on April 28th. Kellerman's diary entry from that night, preserved in faded ink on pages that smell of salt and mildew, says simply, "They're going to study it until everyone's dead. Maybe I should just build one myself, see if it works. What are they going to do, court-martial me for saving lives?" He never built it, he never had to. Because on May 4th, a pilot from the Bunker Hill named Henley mounted a mirror in his Corsair and proved the concept worked. Word spread through the fleet the way wildfire spreads through dry grass. Fast, unstoppable, beyond anyone's ability to control. By May 12th, Kellerman was receiving visits from pilots asking if he could help them install mirrors. He said yes. He requisitioned supplies through unofficial channels, the kind of channels that exist on every military vessel, where sailors solve problems by trading favors and ignoring regulations. Mirrors appeared: automotive, personal, medical, optical. Some came from the ship's store. Some came from packages mailed from home. One came from a shattered Zero's cockpit, pulled from wreckage recovered by a destroyer escort. Kellerman installed 43 mirrors in 18 days. A maintenance log entry dated May 30th, 1945, logged under miscellaneous equipment modifications, lists installation of visual aid devices, pilot request, authorized by Lieutenant Kellerman, USNR. The word authorized appears to have been added later in different ink, possibly during a post-war records review. On June 4th, Kellerman received a second memo from the Bureau of Aeronautics. This one, shorter than the first, acknowledged field reports indicating positive pilot reception of auxiliary mirror installations. It requested detailed specifications, photographs and performance data for potential evaluation and possible fleet-wide standardization. Possible standardization. The war ended before the evaluation was completed. After demobilization, Howard Kellerman returned to Boston and spent 31 years as a consulting engineer for Raytheon, working on radar systems and missile guidance. His name appears on 14 patents. His obituary in the Boston Globe, dated October 15, 1991, mentions his MIT degree, his Navy service, and his contributions to aerospace engineering. It does not mention mirrors. In 1987, during an oral history interview conducted by the MIT Alumni Association, Kellerman was asked if he had any memorable experiences from the war. The transcript shows he paused for 11 seconds before answering, "I wrote a memo once. Nobody listened. Then a pilot did what I'd suggested without asking permission. And it worked. That's how things actually get done, not through channels, through people who see a problem and fix it because waiting means dying." The interviewer asked if he felt bitter about the lack of recognition. Kellerman's response, "Recognition for what? I didn't invent mirrors, I just wrote a memo. The pilot, I don't even remember his name. He's the one who made it real. You don't get medals for paperwork." He did remember the name. He'd kept a copy of the Bunker Hills squadron roster in a desk drawer for 42 years. After his death, his daughter found it folded inside a leather-bound notebook, Henley's name circled in red pencil. The crew chief's letter, May 18th, 1945, USS Intrepid. Below the flight deck, aviation machinist's mate First Class Vincent Russo had served on carriers since 1943. He'd been at the Battle of the Philippine Sea. He'd survived 2 kamikaze hits on the Intrepid. He knew more about F-4U Corsairs than most of the pilots who flew them, because pilots only knew how the aircraft performed in the air. Russo knew how it bled, how it broke, how its parts wore and failed and needed nursing back to life. His service jacket, archived in St. Louis, lists him as 5 feet 6 inches, 140 pounds, with a thick Brooklyn accent that made officers repeat themselves. He'd worked in his uncle's garage before the war, specializing in bodywork and custom modifications. His hands were scarred from sheet metal and burnt from exhaust pipes. On May 18th, he was supervising maintenance on 6 Corsairs that had returned from a dawn patrol. Routine inspections, oil levels, tire pressure, control surface integrity, ammunition counts. He was checking the canopy seals on Bureau number 82547 when he noticed something unusual. A mirror, 3 inches by 6 inches. Mounted on the left canopy frame with a bracket that looked homemade, 2 pieces of aluminum bent at precise angles, held in place with machine screws through the frame rail. The work was clean, professional, not jury-rigged. Russo examined the installation for 3 minutes, tracing the angles with his eye. The mirror was positioned to reflect the airspace above and behind the aircraft. The bracket allowed for adjustment. The mounting points were reinforced to prevent stress cracks. He found the pilot in the ready room. Lieutenant J.G. Peter Vukovic, 26, from Pittsburgh. Flight log showed 93 combat hours. Russo asked about the mirror. Vukovic explained. He'd heard about it from a pilot on the Bunker Hill. Installed it himself 5 days ago. Used a mirror from his shaving kit and brackets made from a damaged gun sight mount. Cost $0. Time 30 minutes. Results. He'd spotted 2 kamikazes before they closed to firing range. Russo asked if it worked. Vukovic's response, recorded in a letter Russo wrote to his wife dated May 19, 1945. He looked at me like I'd asked if the sun was hot. He said, "Chief, I can see behind me now. I couldn't before. You do the math." The letter, donated to the Veterans History Project in 2003, continues. "So I did the math, Marie. If it works for him, it'll work for all of them. But we don't have enough mirrors on this ship for 36 planes. I talked to the supply officer. He says he can get mirrors if I can prove they're necessary. Necessary. Like pilots not dying isn't necessary enough." Russo spent the next day conducting an unauthorized survey. He walked the hangar deck talking to every pilot he could find, asking the same question. Would you use a mirror if you had one? 31 pilots said yes, 3 said maybe, 2 said it wouldn't help. 1 said he'd already installed his own, but didn't want anyone to know in case it was against regulations. On May 21st, Russo typed a memo, 2-finger Hunt and Peck, on a borrowed typewriter, addressed to the Air Group Commander. The document, preserved in the Intrepid's war diary archived at the Naval History and Heritage Command, reads in part, "Request permission to install auxiliary visual equipment, mirrors, in all VF-10 aircraft. Pilots report improved situational awareness and earlier threat detection. Estimated cost, $4,000 per aircraft. Materials available through ship's store and personal supplies. Installation can be completed in 72 hours with current maintenance staff. Recommend immediate approval." The memo was signed, dated, and delivered. Response came back in 6 hours. "Approved, proceed with installation. Document all modifications for post-action review. 6 hours, not 6 weeks." Russo requisitioned every mirror on the Intrepid, 18 from the ship's store, 11 from personal lockers, voluntarily donated by crew members who heard what they were for, 7 from damaged aircraft being cannibalized for parts. He fabricated brackets in the machine shop using scrap aluminum and worked through 2 nights with a team of 5 mechanics. By May 24th, 36 Corsairs had mirrors. The installation became standard procedure. Every time a Corsair returned from combat, Russo's crew checked the mirror alignment, the same way they checked oil pressure and ammunition. The mirrors became part of the aircraft, as essential as the gun sight or the radio. A maintenance report dated June 8, 1945, includes a section titled Non-standard equipment performance analysis. The relevant passage. Auxiliary visual devices, mirrors, installed in F-4U aircraft show zero mechanical failures over 14 days of combat operations. Pilot feedback uniformly positive. Recommendation: continue use until directed otherwise. Until directed otherwise, no directive ever came. Vincent Russo survived the war. He returned to Brooklyn in October 1945 and opened an automotive repair shop on Flatbush Avenue. He married his wife Marie in 1946. They had 4 children. He installed rear-view mirrors on cars for 37 years. In 1983, a reporter from Naval Aviation News tracked him down while researching an article on carrier operations at Okinawa. Russo, then 61, gave a brief interview. The article, published in the March 1984 issue, includes this quote: "We didn't wait for permission. We saw a problem and we fixed it. That's what you do in a war. You fix things, you keep people alive, everything else is paperwork." The article does not mention that Russo kept a photograph on his workshop wall for 38 years, a group shot of VF-10 pilots standing in front of their Corsairs, taken on May 25, 1945. If you look closely, and the photograph is poor quality, faded with age, you can see small rectangular glints in some of the cockpits, reflections, catching the sun. The Japanese report. June 12, 1945, Imperial Japanese Navy Air Service Headquarters, Tokyo. The document was typed on thin paper, single-spaced, marked GME Secret, in red characters at the top of each page. 23 pages analyzing American fighter tactics observed between March and June 1945. The report was compiled by Lieutenant Commander Saburo Watanabe, a former fighter pilot who'd survived 93 combat missions before being reassigned to intelligence analysis due to injuries sustained during a forced landing in February. The document was captured by American occupation forces in September 1945, translated in October, and filed as ATIS document J67834. It was declassified in 1973. Most of it deals with American radio procedures, formation tactics, and gunnery techniques. But page 17 contains a section titled Observed Changes in Enemy Defensive Patterns, April-June period. The translation, archived at the MacArthur Memorial Library and Museum in Norfolk, Virginia, reads, "Beginning approximately 10 May, American F-4U pilots demonstrate significantly improved ability to detect and engage TOCO aircraft during final attack approach. Previous success rate of TOCO attacks against F-4U protected vessels estimated 23–27%. Current success rate estimated 11–14%. Analysis of engagement patterns suggests American pilots now detect approaching TOCO aircraft 8 to 12 seconds earlier than previously observed. Method of detection improvement unknown. Possible explanations: 1. Enhanced radar coordination with fighters. 2. Improved pilot training in vertical scan techniques. 3. Introduction of unknown detection equipment. Recommendation: TOCO aircraft should approach from directly astern when possible, avoiding overhead approaches, where American detection capability appears most improved. Cloud cover essential. Multiple simultaneous attacks necessary to overwhelm defensive response. Unknown detection equipment. The phrase appears 3 times in the report. Each time, Watanabe added a marginal note, visible in the original document, but not included in the official translation. A Japanese linguist working on a research project in 1998 examined the original and provided a more complete translation of the notes. American fighters observed with small rectangular object mounted inside cockpit, upper left position, purpose unknown, possibly navigation device or new gun sight component, unable to determine function from observation distance. Watanabe had seen the mirrors. He'd noted them. He'd tried to understand what they were, but his report never made the connection between the rectangular objects and the improved detection times, because the concept was too simple, too obvious, too much like something that shouldn't work well enough to matter. A mirror. In a research paper published in 1989 by the Journal of Military History, Professor Takeshi Nakamura of Waseda University analyzed Japanese intelligence reports from 1944-1945. His paper, titled Intelligence Failures in Late-War Imperial Japanese Naval Aviation, includes a section discussing Watanabe's report. The observer came within a single logical step of identifying a significant American tactical adaptation, but failed to make the connection because the solution appeared too unsophisticated for modern aerial warfare. This cognitive bias, expecting complex problems to require complex solutions, appears repeatedly in late-war Japanese intelligence assessments. Professor Nakamura interviewed former Japanese naval officers for his research. One of them, a pilot who'd survived the war, said, "If someone had told me the Americans were using automobile mirrors to spot our attacks, I would have thought they were joking. It sounds like something from a comic book, not from actual combat." But that's the thing about desperate situations. The absurd becomes practical. Saburo Watanabe survived the war. He became a professor of aeronautical engineering at Kyoto University and spent 26 years teaching aircraft design. His obituary in the Asahi Shimbun, dated March 4, 1979, mentions his wartime service and his academic career. It does not mention the report. It does not mention the mirrors he saw but didn't understand. In 2001, a graduate student at Kyoto University discovered Watanabe's personal papers in a university archive. Among them, a notebook containing sketches of American aircraft drawn from memory. On one page, a detailed drawing of an F-4U Corsair cockpit interior viewed from the side. In the upper left corner, carefully rendered, a small rectangular shape mounted on the canopy frame. Beneath it, in Japanese, "Purpose unknown." The historian's question, September 17, 2008. National Museum of Naval Aviation, Pensacola, Florida. Dr. Rebecca Torres had been researching Pacific War fighter tactics for 7 years, working on a book about carrier aviation at Okinawa. She'd reviewed thousands of pages of action reports, maintenance logs, and pilot debriefings. She'd interviewed 32 surviving veterans. She'd examined gun camera footage and damage assessment photographs, and she kept finding references to mirrors, not many, not obvious. But there, a maintenance log entry here, a passing mention in a letter there, a footnote in a squadron history written in 1946. The references were scattered, fragmentary, inconsistent. Some called them visual aids, some called them auxiliary equipment. One called them that mirror thing. On September 17th, she was reviewing Squadron VF-84 records when she found Henley's name. The entry was brief. Lieutenant CDR Henley, Jr. Authorized installation of auxiliary viewing device, May 1945. A footnote referenced a maintenance form that should have been filed with the records. The form was missing. She filed a request with the National Archives. 3 months later, she received a response. The form couldn't be located. It might have been lost during a records consolidation in 1961, or it might never have been properly filed in the first place. Dead end. But the archivist included a note. "You might try the Naval History and Heritage Command. They have some VF-84 material that didn't make it into the main collection." She filed another request. 6 months later, she received a photocopy of a single page, a handwritten maintenance log from May 4, 1945. The entry, in faded blue ink, described the installation of a reflective viewing device in Bureau number 57823. Pilot, Henley. Mechanic, unknown. Materials cost, $2. $2.15. She found 3 more references in other squadrons, then 7, then 12. Each one slightly different, each one fragmentary. Each one suggesting that something had happened in the spring of 1945 that nobody had thought to document systematically. Because it wasn't official, because it wasn't authorized, because it was just pilots and mechanics solving a problem the only way they knew how, by improvising, adapting, and not waiting for someone to tell them it was okay. In 2011, Dr. Torres published her book, Victory at Okinawa, Carrier Aviation in the Last Campaign. Chapter 7 is titled The Mirror Modification, an Unauthorized Solution. It runs 18 pages and includes every reference she'd found, every interview she'd conducted, every document fragment that mentioned mirrors. The chapter ends with a question she couldn't answer. How many lives were saved by this modification? The records don't provide enough data for statistical analysis. We know mirrors were widely used. We know pilots reported improved situational awareness. We know kamikaze success rates declined in May-June 1945. But correlation is not causation, and too many factors change simultaneously to isolate any single variable. What we can say with certainty is this. When faced with a tactical problem that was killing pilots at a predictable rate, the official response was to study it. The unofficial response was to fix it. History tends to record the official version. Sometimes the truth lives in maintenance logs and personal letters, in the spaces between what was approved and what was actually done. The book received positive reviews. It won an award from the American Military Institute. It sold 8,400 copies in hardcover. And 3 years after publication, Dr. Torres received an email from a woman in Arizona named Patricia Henley Morrison. Subject line, "My Father's Mirror." The email said, "I read your book, Chapter 7. You wrote about a pilot named James Henley who installed a mirror in his Corsair in 1945. That was my father. He never talked about it. I found a box in his garage after he died, papers, photographs, some old tools. One of them was a small mirror, 3 inches by 8 inches, with 2 mounting holes drilled in the frame. On the back, written in marker, May 1945, it worked. I don't know if this is the actual mirror from the plane. I don't know if it matters. But I thought you should know. He kept it. Whatever it was, whatever it meant to him, he kept it for 47 years. Dr. Torres replied immediately, asking if she could examine the mirror. The response came 2 days later. I'm sorry. I donated the box to a veterans organization 3 years ago. I didn't think anyone would care about an old mirror. I didn't know it was part of something bigger. The mirror's current location is unknown. The veterans organization has no record of receiving it. It may have been discarded. It may be in someone's garage, unrecognized. It may be gone. In 2016, Dr. Torres gave a lecture at the Naval War College about unauthorized field modifications during WTOs. During the question period, a retired Navy pilot, a Vietnam veteran who'd flown F-4 Phantoms, raised his hand and said, I had a mirror in my cockpit in 1968, rear-view mirror from a Honda Civic, mounted it myself, saved my life over Hanoi when I saw a MiG coming from my 6 o'clock high. I always figured I'd invented the idea. You're telling me someone did the same thing 23 years earlier. Doctor. Torres showed him the chapter from her book. The pilot read it in silence. Then he looked up and said, Henley, I wish I could shake his hand. So do a lot of people. But history doesn't work that way. History forgets the names of people who solve problems without permission, who make things work without waiting for approval, who see what needs to be done and do it, because the alternative is unacceptable. Sometimes those names surface decades later, in footnotes and archives, in letters and logs, in the margins of official records where someone wrote something down because it seemed worth remembering. And sometimes, most times, they disappear completely, leaving only the results. Fewer deaths, more survivors. Ships that didn't burn, families that weren't destroyed. The math is simple. The mirror gave pilots 10 seconds of warning. 10 seconds across hundreds of sorties, multiplied by the probability of detection, multiplied by the probability of successful engagement, equals X number of kamikazes destroyed before reaching their targets. X equals how many lives? The equation cannot be solved. Too many variables, too little data, too much chaos. But somewhere in the vast calculus of war, the number exists, written in invisible ink, saved by $2 and common sense. The stories of forgotten ingenuity don't end here. Follow for weekly posts uncovering the improvised adaptations, unauthorized modifications, and brilliant field solutions that change the course of history. $1 $2 fix at a time.